Pritha Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, you are saying something?
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we actually had to discuss 13.15, but one second, I'm just opening the chapter here. But the verse that we did, 13.8 to 12, we actually were not able to finish the purport. Still, there was a lot of things to be covered there, but accidentally the speakers after Padmalochini Mataji, they skipped that and they started the new verses. So before we move forward today, let us just finish that purport, and then we can start. After that, we can start with the verse 13.15. So I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Okay, is everyone able to see the screen now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so I'll recite the translation for this verse, and then we'll skip to the part from where we have to read the purport. So these are verses 13.8 to 12. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge. And besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So we had covered all this here, and we had to start from here. So I'll start reading from here. So actually in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is basically all the qualities that are described. Prabhupada is very nicely explaining all these qualities. For example, he described about the quality of humility. Now, he says that humility means that there is no desire for uh, receiving any. One second, it's a very classic definition. Humility means where is that? Yeah, here it says humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. So very classic definition he gives. No, he's not saying that we should not accept honor from others. He's not saying that we should do dishonorable things. He's saying that our actions should not be motivated by the desire to receive honor from others. So like that, every quality, cleanliness, steadiness, false ego, everything he is actually giving, he's describing what those qualities means and how those qualities can be developed. So this is what we'll start from here. So as for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Accept the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna, have some discussion on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These four things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness following these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. But if it is not congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. One must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life, because in this world one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Happiness and distress are concomitant factors of material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad Gita. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. So one should be detached from the materialistic way of life and be automatically equipoised in both cases. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy, and when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in the spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that stage, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in the nine processes of devotional service: chanting, hearing, worshipping, offering respect, etc. As described in the last verse of the ninth chapter, that process should be followed. So the last verse of ninth chapter was, anyone want to mention what is the verse? Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mam and just become my devotee, offer obeisances to me. In this way, if you lead your life, you'll surely come back to me. Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. That would go against his grain. One may test himself by seeing how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function, because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject, but according to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discretion into the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand the self. That is recommended here. So about this research about soul, there is a very interesting discussion of Srila Prabhupada with Professor Brentford, I believe, which happened in Princeton. I will talk about it later. Let us first finish this. As far as self-realization is concerned, it is clearly stated here that Bhakti Yoga is especially practical. As soon as there is a question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the super soul cannot be one, at least not in the bhakti conception, the devotional conception of life. This service of the individual soul to the supreme soul is eternal, nityam, as it is clearly stated. So bhakti or devotional service is eternal. One should be established in that philosophical conviction. So here Prabhupada is saying that, for bhakti, the soul and the super soul has to exist separate from each other, because if there is no separation, there is no bhakti. For a relationship to exist between two people, those two people have to exist separate from each other, and then you can establish a relationship. Whereas the Mayavadi idea is that the soul goes and merges into Brahman, so basically it loses its identity, its spiritual identity, which is not congenial to bhakti, and actually it does not. They say that the soul merges into, it is like, you put some drop of water into the water, and then it completely dissolves in it. It's not like that actually. Ramanujacharya, in his commentary, he quotes from various shastras, and even in the Bhagavad Gita verse 2.13, he basically makes it very clear that there is no point where the soul will lose its individuality. The individuality is irrefutable, it is always existing. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11, this is explained. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. Those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in three different phases as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. Bhagwan is the last word in the realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up to that platform of understanding the supreme personality of Godhead and thus engage in the devotional service of the Lord. That is the perfection of knowledge. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase, beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks I am God because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. So here, actually, Srila Prabhupada, or actually in these verses, Krishna is talking about some qualities. But at the same time, it also says that it also says that this is the process of knowledge. Now, how can qualities be the process of knowledge? You know, so actually, what does knowledge really mean? Anyone wants to answer that? What does really knowledge mean? What is knowledge? Anyone has any comments, suggestions about what exactly is knowledge? How do you define it?
Knowledge of the Kshetra, I mean, understanding of the Kshetra.
No, not in these terms. I'm just the general. When we use the word knowledge, in the word knowledge in English, what do we really mean? We may have knowledge about some country, some continent, about this world. So, what exactly is knowledge? How do you define it? Okay, so basically, what knowledge is it is basically information. Informative. When you
Isn't it also real knowledge means understanding the self, who the self is, and relationship of the self to Krishna? I would think is the basis of real knowledge.
Right. No, in general sense, when we use the word knowledge, we are talking in a philosophical sense, in a spiritual sense. That is correct what you said, Mataji. But when we really talk about knowledge in a general sense, that do you have knowledge? So what knowledge means is, do you have information about something? Okay, I know about this. I know about America. I know about India. I know about Australia, etc. So Gyan in the Vedic culture is not just information. Gyan means knowledge that transforms us. It is transformative knowledge, and we'll talk more about this in a minute. But so what does knowledge actually do? It gives us a worldview and an approach, and also it helps us to overcome any problems that we may face. So if we consider that knowledge helps us to solve the problems, we have to first identify what those problems are. So when we know the problems, then we identify the solution, and also there is an approach to the solution. So the first step for us is to identify what is the correct problem. Now, generally, we may say that, yeah, I have this problem, that problem, I need money, I need green card, etc., etc. But are there really problems for us? Are there really problems? So scriptures tells us what are the real problems of our life, or in other words, what are the universal problems of life. So how do we identify the real problems? Now, in order for us to classify a problem as a real problem, or a real or a real universal problem, the problem should have three primary characteristics. Now, these three primary characteristics are: first is, it is something that nobody wants. Now, it is a situation, a condition that nobody actually wants it. Nobody desires to have it. That is the first. Second is, no, there is no solution available to that problem. Whatever that condition is, that situation is, there is no solution to it. And the third is, it is a problem for everyone. We don't desire it, we don't want it, there is no solution to it, but irrespective of all that, everybody gets it. It is a problem for every single person. Now, if we actually apply this framework, then we will understand that actually the real problems of life are death, old age, and disease. Actually, what is mentioned in this verse is Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. Now, darshan is a is a very strong word. It is so the philosophy. No, philosophy we say in English, but the translation of philosophy in Sanskrit is darshan. Darshan is actually see the truth. When we say we are going to take the darshan of the lordships, we are actually factually seeing the form of the Lord. No, it is the darshan. So it is the seeing the truth means darshan, and that is exactly what philosophy means. So janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanu darshanam. So without identifying this problem of the material existence, one cannot move forward towards the right solution. So once we have understood, okay, this is our problem, then we can strive to make some solution to that particular problem. So the Vedic culture, what it does is it takes everything to a very foundational level. In the Christian theology, there is what is called as the problem of evil. They say, why does God let innocent children die? Why does God let innocent people in thousands die during tsunamis or earthquakes? How can a good God allow such evil to happen in this world? So this is a serious problem in the Western theology, and they just can't wrap their heads around it. If God is good, why would He allow these terrible things to happen in the first place? Now we have this problem of coronavirus, and people are dying in thousands and lakhs, and there is just no stopping to it. It's still going on. So but the Vedic culture, what it does is it takes everything to the foundational level. So it is not that the young children dying is a problem, or thousands of people dying due to coronavirus is a problem. No, rather death itself is a problem. Why should a person die at all? No, forget about a young person dying or a tsunami coming or earthquake. No, why should we die at all? Even if I become old, and why should actually I become old? Why shouldn't I just remain young forever? So everyone should live eternally. So death itself is evil. And the solution to that problem is mentioned in this verse also, is devotional service. So everything else there is there so that we can take shelter of Krishna. We can take, so all these qualities that are described besides the devotional service, it is all there so that we can basically take shelter of Krishna more and more. And we'll talk about these qualities also. But we were discussing how these qualities can be described as process of knowledge. So actually there is a saying, you might have heard it: we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. We don't see the world as it is actually, we see the world as we are. Therefore, if we want to change our worldview, the Vedic culture says change your own nature, change your own consciousness. That is why later in the 14th chapter, Krishna will describe Satvat Sanjayate Jnanam. Gyan doesn't come just by study, it comes by living a Sattvaguni lifestyle. Sattvaguna, or mode of goodness, basically. So by developing these qualities, knowledge will develop automatically. By developing these qualities, knowledge will awaken in our hearts. That's why this is called as process of knowledge. And Srila Prabhupada very expertly writes in the purport that the most important thing for us is Mai cha ananya yogena bhaktir avabicharini. By rendering devotional service, these qualities will develop automatically. We don't have to, first develop this quality of humility and then quality of tolerance and all those separately. All we have to do is render devotional service to Krishna, and by that rendering a devotional service, everything else will come on its own. So we were discussing about how Gyan is not informational, it is a knowledge that transforms us. So what we know is not as important as what is the effect of what we know on us. I may be an academic scholar who might have done all Bhakti Shastri, and then what is that, Bhakti Vaibhav, studied all the Goswami literatures, Gita Govinda, Ujjwal Neelmani, and all that. But important point is, how does it really changes me as a person? If it doesn't changes me, if I'm still the stubborn old person where I'm going around bossing everybody and doing all sorts of nonsense things, how does it matter what knowledge I have? So most of you would know that pastimes of Radhanath Maharaj. One time he was giving a lecture in a university here in USA, and then there was a bearded professor sitting at the back, almost at the back, right at the back. So he said, Swamiji, I have done my PhD in Gita Govinda, and I know what Krishna does with the gopis in Vrindavan. Now, why do you worship such a lusty god? Can't you find someone better to worship? So Maharaj, he was a little taken aback by this question, by this, seemingly old-looking person. And he said, Now, with due respect to you, I would like to inform you that you have done your PhD without passing your KG. You know, KG is kindergarten. So we may say that, no, what do you mean by that? So actually, Maharaj said, "No, actually, the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world, they are the culmination, the topmost summit of spiritual realization. And spiritual realization begins. Now, the KG is to realize that you are not the body, you are the soul. And if you want to realize that you are not the body, you are the soul, you have to follow the regulative principles: no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex, and no cigarette smoking." And this professor had a cigarette in his hand actually. So Maharaj was continuing the discussion with him, and he wanted to escape. Maharaj was going on trying to explain him. So he wanted to escape. So he said, "My wife is calling me, I have to go." And then he just fled from there. so so the point is that actually it is not by academic study that one can enter into the mysteries of spiritual understanding. No, why? Because spiritual reality is not like material reality. The spiritual reality is an entirely different realm. So how do we understand this? It's a entirely different realm. So suppose there are some tribals who don't know what is the concept of a language, and so leave alone reading, they don't even know what is the concept of what does language actually mean. So but they have a special skill to measure objects very systematically in terms of their shape, their size, their dimensions, their weight, their color, etc, etc. But if you provide them with a book, they will just look at it and then see what is its weight, what is its size. So such a person who has no conception of language is brought to a library. So he will think that all these people, they are wasting their time, lazy bums sitting and looking at these pieces of paper. What are they doing actually? So now it is not by a further addition of knowledge that they will be able to understand the concept of language and a book, but one needs a complete, they call it in physics the quantum leap. no Not just by a step by step jump, they need a leap of consciousness by which one can start understanding the concept of reading. And when the person starts reading the book, then he will understand that the object is the same, but it is not the same. A whole new world of learning and understanding and enjoyment has opened up when one rises to a higher level. Similarly, to understand the spiritual realm, we need a quantum leap of consciousness. Now, some people say that there is no spiritual realm because through our science, we couldn't prove that there is anything spiritual. So generally, the mainstream science, when it studies
Prabhuji, Prabhuji, I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Prabhuji.
So first, I read about information. You might also have read. There is a lower level data, and then we have information, and that matures further to become knowledge when it is true. And the second one is, you said about scientists don't say about spiritual thing. You just said. So they acknowledge that there are sentient beings. So they call sentient loka to Vaikuntha loka. If one reads in Wikipedia sentient beings, so they acknowledge that there are planets where people are living, and they are just sentient being. They don't have body like us. So they somehow or other acknowledge. I was conversing with a professor at Cornell, and she mentioned, that there are sentient beings, but they don't acknowledge that that is God's, supreme abode.
So when you say sentient beings, are you referring to aliens, or what are you exactly referring?
I think they are saying it to some way or other by Kuntaloka.
Okay.
Like the
So,
way it's described in our scriptures, that
yeah.
Sachidananda.
Okay, I mean, that could be true. I'm not debating it, Prabhuji. But my understanding is that they don't accept any spirituality in a sense that they don't accept the existence of soul. That there is some abstract entity which is called a soul that they do not accept. They may accept, okay, there may be some aliens, and there is those talks about UFOs now, that, you know, and some people are saying that even NASA have accepted, and they have released some videos that there are some UFOs that have actually been spotted, etc., etc. But what I'm trying to say is, when we say spirituality, that starts with, you know, the knowledge of the soul, and we'll talk about it how.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But there are theories like
Okay.
scientists are studying consciousness. Like
Yeah.
I studied consciousness about 6 years using different models. So they are studying where does consciousness come from in our
Right.
body.
Right.
And Western philosopher says it's our mind in our head, but Eastern philosophy says it's heart, like Paramatma and soul. So they can't they can't discover, or they can't explain it until they accept that there is a soul in our heart.
Exactly.
So recently, for the last, I think, for the last 6-7 years, they are saying the spiritual theory of consciousness. So they are acknowledging that everything has a spirit, even proton, electron, neutron. And they are trying to say the Gita philosophy in explaining the consciousness.
Yeah, I do know that they are trying to study consciousness, and even in MIT they have this concept of artificial intelligence, where they are first trying to understand what exactly is consciousness, and then apply it to these higher concepts like artificial intelligence and all. But they don't really understand consciousness in terms of how we understand it. So they understand that, okay, this body is conscious, and then, you know, there has to be some source within the body from which the consciousness is radiated throughout the body. So some scientists say that, okay, it is, the source is the brain, or as you said, it could be heart. But they don't understand consciousness in terms of how we understand it. So we understand that consciousness is the defining energy of the soul. You know, when soul is there, the defining energy is consciousness. So there is also this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I forgot which chapter, but where Krishna says that, okay, that the soul is present in the body, and just as the sun is present in the sky, it uses the analogy of sun, it illuminates the whole universe. Like that, the soul is present inside the body at, you know, at a very minute level, it is present, and it illuminates the whole body with consciousness. So we understand consciousness in terms of the defining energy of the soul, but that is not how the material science understands consciousness. So there are a lot of differences, but I do agree with you that they are currently studying. And
There,
as yours,
there are different questions. Like our spiritual scientist quoted one neurosurgeon and neurologist who is widely accepted and worshipped in modern medical science. And he asked that there there is a question in our mind, in our motor system, when we want to use our hands, our legs, motor organs. And he explained it very systematically, and I went back and I found the book also. It's one of the unsolved problem in neurology, neuroscience. So he asked that neuroscientist and neurosurgeon asked, where does the desire comes in the first place? You know, so that our spiritual scientist, what's his name?
Chaitanya Charan Prabhu.
Chaitanya Charan Prabhu said that is the soul,
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating that they don't accept the soul, but they have that question, They have that question, and they declare that this is one of the unsolved problem in neurology.
Actually, there are many such problems in neurology. So, for example, you are talking about soul, but they don't even understand the concept of mind. They understand that there is a brain, but brain is different from mind. Brain is the gross
Exactly,
part of the body.
Yeah,
But
Prabhupada said in somewhere in the purport that if scientists will be able to discover, they will discover that mind has shape, because it's
they don't
grass.
really understand the difference between the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul. So they do understand to some degree that the brain is the computer of the body, so to speak. But also, generally speaking, many even Westerners do believe kind of unscientifically in past life. I mean, they do actually believe it, but they can't explain it as well as, you know, the Bhagavad Gita does and the Eastern philosophy does. And from a Christian perspective, they have a vague, they do refer to the kingdom of God, but really most of the Christians really believe that they go to heaven or hell. You know, they really, when they talk about their concept of going somewhere, they talk more in a heavenly planet kind of conception, what we call as heavenly planets or Swarga, you know, Brahmaloka, you know, that kind of lokas. But they really don't have that spiritual Vaikuntha Loka concept, you know. They don't. And they, like Ganapati Govind said, they think that they might leave this gross body, but they get like another body. They think more in a bodily concept and not the soul concept. You know, they don't really understand that the soul migrates from body to body, and until it perfects itself, it really can't go back to the kingdom of God. That's not what they believe. They believe that, you know.
I guess that is the reason they preserve their bodies.
Yeah, actually, they believe in the theory of resurrection, that their body will be resurrected, you know, because Jesus was resurrected like that at the time of, final
Day of
test,
judgment.
day of judgment. Their bodies will be resurrected and they will rise to heaven in the same bodies. And
Right.
their conception of heaven is more like a, everlasting family reunion. You know, you will have your
Right,
uncles,
right.
everybody will be there, the
Everybody will
same
be
people,
there,
like
right.
your relatives. Even
Right.
now, so people nowadays people are, many Westerners, they are attached to their pets, their dogs and their cats. So now they asked a question to the their clerics, etc. So what happened to her, because we really love them. So then their pope came up with not the pope, but some of the clerics, they came up with a fancy idea that, if you're a devout Christian, even your pets will meet with you in the heaven. You'll have the same pets also. So they have a very fancy idea of heaven, which is not exactly what we have, or the kingdom of God as we have. So they actually don't understand anything about God. They don't have no knowledge about God. So they don't know what to do in the spiritual world. When you go to the kingdom of God, they just understand that, okay, there is like a perpetual family reunion, and there would be some distinct being
I
with
know, but early Christianity actually does have vestiges of Vaishnavism when you look at early Christianity, you know. I mean, it even says that they followed vegetarianism, and they did believe, even Jesus himself, that Peter existed before, you know. So they do talk about, you know, prior existence before the current existence, you know. So early Christianity, and there is also, they also have the concept that if you call upon the name of Christ when you die, you're going to go back to Christ. Just like how we say in the Bhagavad Gita, if you call upon the name of, you know, whoever you think of at the time of death, you know, is where you will go back to. They do have that concept too. So when you see some of the concepts, you can see the vestiges, you know, where it came from.
Yeah, I mean,
I work with a professor, Jewish professor at Yale, and he is very open. So he is reading Quran, and I gave him a set of Gita and Gita lectures. And he said that in their marriages also they take like they take around like 7 rounds or 5 rounds like we do for the China. So yeah, but Pyare Prabhu will be able to explain it in detail. Thank you. I'm done.
So yeah, so I was talking about, so you were talking about the mind, Prabhu. I was mentioning that they don't even really understand what exactly is mind. So the way we understand mind is a little different, or the way the Bhagavad Gita explains. So the Bhagavad Gita explains that, okay, so mind is a sense and all other senses are centered around the mind. So what really mind does is basically it integrates all the inputs that we get from the various senses. So you were talking about the problem of neurology. So actually this is also one of the problems. So they understand that, okay,
Prabhuji, science also explains this, that when we smell, the signal goes to olfactory bulb in our brain,
right.
you know, and when we hear, the signal goes in the brain. So, and that's what they say, that the mind is in the brain, you know.
Yeah,
So they
no,
they don't have distinction like we have, you
right.
know, but they say that to to be able to act through all the 5 working senses, we need mind, because mind is the central processor.
Exactly, it
Signal goes
processes
in
the
the
inputs.
processing in the cortex and thalamus, and then it goes in the visual cortex, and that's where the image is formed, and then
Correct.
comes to the eye again.
Yeah, they understand that there are many neurons in the brain, and they understand that, okay, when there is an input comes from the eye, a different section of neurons get activated. When we hear a sound, a different section of neurons will get activated. So but there is no one common set of neurons that will be activated to basically integrate all the inputs from all the senses. For example, when we see a bird flying, we see the shape, the color, the bird is flapping the wings and it is going and it is making a sound. So we get that the input that we get is like a combined, like an integrated input. We see the everything together, but they are not able to understand how does that integration happens within the brain, because they don't completely understand the concept of mind. So actually mind is that object, or at that sense, that basically integrates the input that is coming from all the different senses. Once they understand that, so because they are studying at a gross level, they're not studying at a subtle level, and they can't study at a subtle level. It is, at least the way they are studying right now, I don't think it is possible, but you might know it better. So yeah. All right. So I was talking about that, we really need a quantum leap of consciousness to understand the spiritual realm. So generally, the mainstream science, when it studies an object, what it does is it analyzes the object. So the analytical way is to break things into their components, understand the components, and then try to bring them together. That is how science analyzes things. Now, there is another way to learn about things, which is called the synthetic way. The synthetic way is to look at the complete thing as it is, and then learn as we go along with it. Like for example, when we have small kids, like I had my son and my daughter, and I was surprised that they automatically picked up the language that we speak, the mother tongue, as we say, and all kids do. We don't actually tell them, okay, this is a noun, this is a verb, this is this, and this is how you make the sentences. They just saw us speaking, and then they picked up the language and they started talking to us. Later on, they might go and learn the about the nouns and the verbs and the pronouns and whatnot. But that is like the synthetic way of, you just see things as they are and then observe it and then take things, then absorb those things. That is the synthetic way. So the academic approach to learn is the analytical way, break things in its component. But that doesn't really work with spirituality so much. So the synthetic way is, one lives in the association of the devotees and one learns the culture, and not just the culture, we learn the philosophy also. So what happens when we live in the association of devotees? We see that the devotees live with certain qualities, certain principles and values, and those values are what are embodied by us. So Krishna is talking about those values over here. He is not just talking about information in terms of just knowing. So I was talking about how Srila Prabhupada have had many interesting discussions and debates with many different scientists about spirituality. So one interesting discussion is with Professor Brentford, and this I believe happened in Princeton. Excuse me. So this professor came to meet Srila Prabhupada, and they were actually going for a nice morning walk in a nice big park. So Prabhupada, actually there's a long conversations. Prabhupada asked him, so what is the current scientific knowledge about the soul? So Professor Brentford said, Swamiji, currently there is no scientific knowledge about the soul. So Prabhupada, he said, that means there is no scientific knowledge at all. So the professor was a little shaken. He was the professor of science. So he said, no, Swamiji, scientific knowledge is a different category of knowledge, and spiritual knowledge is a different category of knowledge. So now we have, so he said, now we have so many so we have so much scientific knowledge. Just for example, look at this grass. Now we have 2 big volumes of books that describes how this grass grows. So Prabhupada said, even without your volumes, the grass was growing. So, so he said, no, but if God didn't want us to study the grass, then why did he put the grass over there? So Prabhupada said, my point is that you are studying the grass, but you are forgetting the God who has put the grass over there. So Prabhupada has these amazing conversations with so many different scientists, and there are many such conversations. And in this chapter, when we discuss more, we can, as we remember, I can also mention. So, but what Prabhupada said, that the knowledge begins with the foundational things. Who is it that have put these objects of knowledge for us, and who is it that is the subject of knowledge? Now, these two are the foundations of knowledge. Now, Krishna will speak later in this chapter. Jnanam, Gyayam, Jnanagamyam. So the foundation of knowledge is very, very shaky in the modern science. Science has progressed tremendously in terms of technology, but it has advanced in terms of manipulation of matter. But even but even in terms of understanding the matter, it doesn't have much understanding. The scientists themselves are very, very confused, and I'm sure Alarnath Prabhu can speak more to it. But when the quantum theory was being developed, at that time, I'm missing the name of the scientist who developed the quantum theory. Alarnath Prabhu, do you remember the name? Okay. So Schrodinger, yeah, right. So Einstein was developing the relativity theory at that time. So, and then Einstein felt that this quantum theory is actually nonsense. So this quantum theory is basically, what it says is everything is just waves. That when we look at this, so for example, if we are looking at this wall, now I can look at this wall. Actually, this wall doesn't exist, but when I look at it, there are some waves that go, and it basically, that waves is what I see. So actually Einstein was very frustrated, and then he made that famous statement, God doesn't play dice. He actually Einstein, he died like a frustrated man. He, one of the last recorded statements that he had made is that, I would like to believe that the ground that I am standing on, that actually exists, it physically exists, but it feels like as if when I'm standing on the ground has been snatched away from below my feet, like that. Because this quantum philosophy, the quantum theory, that just doesn't make any sense. So this, if you consider these two, relativity and quantum physics, they are two completely separate things, but both work. And they are just not able to figure out that how it is working. Even our this scientist who just recently died, what was his name, who used to be on the wheelchair always, he just very recently he died.
Stephen Hawkins.
Stephen Hawkins, yeah. So he also actually attempted to study it, and he made a very enigmatic statement about it. He published a statement about, so basically, that the idea is that they don't understand the nature of reality. What is the nature of material reality? Now, he made a statement that I am happy to inform you that the humanity's quest for knowledge will never stop, or something like that. So basically what he meant to say is, no, he is putting in a nice way, I'm happy to inform you that humanity's quest of knowledge sounds very, very nice, that okay, yeah, our quest for knowledge will always continue. But what it means is that we will never be able to clearly understand what is the nature of reality. So even the scientific world is very confused about what exactly is the nature of reality here. So so we were talking about these qualities, and how these qualities have to be developed. And then I mentioned about how Krishna actually speaks in the 14th chapter that Satvat Sanjayate Jnana. When you live in the mode of goodness, then these qualities will come automatically. So what we try to do in bhakti is we try to imbibe these qualities, when not exactly we go after this, but when we follow the devotional service path, we automatically live in a like a sattvic lifestyle, and then automatically these qualities will imbibe in ourselves. So with that, I think I'll quickly take a pause and see if there are any other comments or questions about what we have discussed today. Any questions, comments? Okay. All right. So
we were discussing about power of knowledge, mainly. Is that right, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji. So these verses that we were discussing, 8 to 12, they basically talk about the process of knowledge.
Yes.
Jnana is what is being described in these verses 8 to 12. So far Krishna has talked about the Kshetra, Kshetragya, and Jnana. And then later he will start talking about Gyayam. Who is it to be known? So that discussion happens after this 13th verse onwards. He starts talking about the super soul. So yes. So what we have discussed in these verses is the process of knowledge, Gyan.
Yes.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I don't think we really have time to start a new verse. Let me quickly check. So the verse that was to be started was verse 15, and it has a big purport. So I think better we can stop here. But what I can also mention a few things about, when this verse says about, can everybody go on mute? There is some echo that is coming up. Yeah, I think that's better. So Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. So basically, these are the real problems. So Prabhupada writes very expertly in the purport that when a person understands that these are the real problems of life, when he understands that okay, this place is not a very happy place to live, there are problems in this world and we need a solution, then he will aspire to go out of this world. So when we talk about death, for example, so these scientists, they actually try to solve these problems at a material level, and these material levels not actually really work. So there is this scientist who recently died in 2011. He came up with a new thing which is called as cryonics. Has anyone heard about it? Cryonics?
Yeah, keeping your body forever. Is that what you're saying? Preservation. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So what?
Cryogenics, I think.
Right. What is the name of this person? Ettinger, Professor Ettinger, Robert Ettinger. I'm sorry, someone was saying something.
I was going to say, I thought Walt Disney had himself frozen for a while, or his body is frozen so he can come back. So I'm like, that was years ago, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. So he died in 2011. His name was Robert Ettinger. He is known as the father of cryonics, and it is still there. There are institutes of cryonics. So what they think is, no, right now there is no way to reverse death. But in future the science will make progress, and in future there will be a way to basically revive the body back. And so what they have done is, so this person Robert Ettinger, he actually had all of his relatives, or the main relatives, his mother, his sister, and all that. He preserved, basically froze the bodies, and then he also said that actually freeze my body also later. And later on, when the science progresses, maybe like 25 years down the line, 50 years down the line, when the science progresses, the body can be revived back. So their whole idea is, they can't just think beyond the body. But even if we look at the material level, at the bodily level, so what happens is this cryonics, when they freeze the body, so actually freezing is irreversible in the sense that the freezing itself damages the body. No, it is not that when you have frozen the body for say at a particular temperature and then we have to defreeze the body, what do we call it, uh, when we bring frozen food, there is this concept, right? Thaw. You thaw it at some temperature, either in the oven or in the microwave, and then it returns back to normal, and then you can eat it. It is not like that. There is no way. Once you have frozen the body, internally the body gets damaged. So leave about reviving the body back. You cannot even the body back. Once it is frozen, the body deforms permanently, and it is irreversible. So solving these problems at a material level, it is not a solution at all. You have to have a spiritual solution to these problems. Similarly, when we talk about diseases, so there is another scientist who have researched on these diseases. So he said that actually these diseases are not actually something that comes up on its own. They are basically the products of our way of life. He explains that earlier when there was farm culture, everybody used to live in a farm community, and people used to do farming. At that time there used to be plagues. The rats were very common at that time, and people used to get plagues. But now we just no longer have that. That kind of culture is not there now because of the industrial revolution. People live in cities, And then we have we have these diseases of completely different kind. We have cancer, we have brain degenerative diseases. All these diseases are coming because of our lifestyle. So there are terrible diseases like say for example dementia. The dementia is, people live like a vegetable. They just can't understand who they are, or they don't recognize the wife will not recognize the husband will not recognize the wife if they have dementia. And obviously they get it when they become really old. So these kind of diseases are there, and he actually writes in his book that there are about 40,000 known diseases known, and they only have cure for about 4,000 diseases. The remaining 36,000 diseases, they don't even have any cure. So if a person gets one of those 36,000 diseases, they're not very common obviously, but if the person gets one of those 36,000 diseases, the person has to just suffer and die. There's just no solution to it. So actually, mrityu and vyadhi we have discussed. Now, similarly, jara, jara is old age. They have now in the modern science they have this gerontology, as they call it. It is the study of old age, and then they keep coming up with stuff, that how to stop the aging of body. Or so they just don't understand why would the body become old and die. They understand that okay, when the rate of production of cells, it is less than the rate at which the cells are getting destroyed, at that time the body keeps becoming old, and then ultimately it perishes. But they don't understand why does it happen. There is no way they can understand it. They have this whole the field of gerontology where they are trying to understand and trying to reverse this process or stop this process at some point. But they are not able to do it. Jayadvaita Maharaj actually had written an article on it once in the BTG magazine. So he was explaining that, so this gerontological associations or these groups, they have big databases. They understand, they know, at least in America, they understand, okay, this person is becoming old. So they actually send, their brochures, etc., to people. So I think Maharaj was explaining that he actually received one such brochure, and this brochure was, if you have this problem, generally people when they become old, so as soon as a person turns 50, they just keep sending this information to him. So if you are, if you have this problem, then we have this therapy. If you have this problem, then we have this therapy. If you have digestive problem, then we have a digestive therapy for you. So like that, they have like a list of things that were identified, and then they say that if you do this, then you will live happily. You won't be able to, you won't have to suffer so much. But Maharaj writes that we don't need this therapy, but these people need illusion therapy. These people are in illusion, so that they can solve these problems at a material level. Actually, that doesn't really work. So similarly, what it says is, this janma. Why is janma a problem? Because janma is problem because we just keep coming back again and again, and then again we go through the same process. Janma mrityu jara vyadhi, janma mrityu jara vyadhi. That is why this janma is also a problem. So these problems are actually something that cannot be. These are the real problems of life, and these problems have no material solution. You have to have a spiritual solution to it, and that spiritual solution is what Krishna giving to us in Bhagavad Gita. So if you understand it completely, if you understand it appropriately, then at least we have a hope to make a solution to these problems. Otherwise, if we just stick to these material science, I don't think we'll probably get any solution at all. So with that, I'll stop here. Are there any other comments, questions about what we discussed? Okay. Prabhuji, you want to add something?
I just want to make one small comment.
Yes, Mataji, go ahead.
When I turned 50 is when I realized that everything that happens in your body cannot be cured.
Exactly.
Because up until then, I would just go to the doctor every time I got sick or had the flu or whatever, and it would just be fixed, like you'd have some medicine. So you almost felt at that comfort level, you could go to the doctor and everything can get fixed, But I think when I turned 50, I had like 3 or 4 things happen to me. I had like something called a rotator cuff tear, which hurt me for like about 8 months. At one point, it was so bad, I almost wanted to cut off my arm, And I recognized the doctors couldn't do anything for it, except like maybe surgery, which really was not a solution, because physical therapy, long physical therapy was what would fix it. And I was trying to weigh between, surgery and physical therapy. But I went through so much pain. And I think that's when I actually surrendered to my Guru Maharaj and decided I need to take initiation, because you come to a point where you recognize there is no material solution to your problem, except there is only a spiritual solution. So I guess old age does kind of make you recognize that. I just wanted to make that comment. It took me up to 50 years to recognize that it's absolutely that nothing, there are things that just can't be solved by going to the doctor and having a quick fix.
I realized right after I turned 30, I could understand something has changed in my body, and it's not the same as it used to be. My diet reduced significantly, my capacity to do things reduced significantly. Just at 30, I could realize it. So, and then obviously,
and I was actually, and Niranjan Maharaj, I asked him what to do, and he asked me to read the teachings of Queen Kunti. And you're not going to believe it. Srila Prabhupada makes this exact statement in the teachings of Queen Kunti. If Krishna decides that you can't lift your arm, you can't lift your arm.
Yeah.
And I could not lift my arm at that time. And that statement was like so profound to me, that for 8 months, I couldn't lift my arm. It took like 8 months of physical therapy somehow to fix it eventually, by Krishna's grace, of course. But you realize that really without Krishna's grace, you can't even lift your arm.
No, he will say that in the same chapter. He will talk about that even the senses, if they have to work according to the will of the super soul. They just
exactly.
can't work.
Yeah, you begin to realize even to lift your arm without the grace of the super soul, or without the grace of the Lord, you cannot lift your arm.
Exactly. 16th or 17th verse, he says that actually, Krishna. So, yeah. All right. I think it's 8 p.m. So if there are no other comments, questions, we can stop here. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, and have a nice night, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you so much.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo.